with that, I would like to invite our first panel. Please join me here. Megan Zoback from Uber, Kai Kuehne from Airbnb, Rodrigo Velloso from YouTube, Luis Samra from Evernote, and our moderator, Josh Constein. Josh is a writer with the TechCrunch, and he's going to be asking questions to our panelists, and you are also welcome to ask questions at the end. So the entire day will be a dialogue, and we all welcome your questions. Thank you, Josh. I think you have this one right here.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming today. I'm really proud to get to come back to my alma mater to speak about such an important topic as finding ways to bring incredible businesses to Brazil. A little bit about myself. I was an undergraduate here and did a sociology with honors degree in 2007, and I designed my own master's program in a degree that I called cyber sociology in 2009. So I was studying how humans interact over the internet, things like Twitter and Facebook, meme popularity cycles, privacy controls, and that prepared me for a career as a technology blogger. I wrote for a website called Inside Facebook until we were acquired, before I was poached by TechCrunch, and I've been writing about technology startups and specifically social startups for the last 3 years. Please follow me on Twitter at Josh Constein if you want to read more of my articles or check out ongoing discussion and analysis of international growth and launch strategies. So today we're going to be talking about what does it mean to get into Brazil? When do you launch there? How do you execute that kind of strategy? What are the differences between America and the rest of the international market in Brazil? And how can companies overcome those challenges to be able to create real community of users, not just a user base, but an interconnected network of users who keep each other on these services. And I'm very proud to have an amazing set of panelists with us today. So if you guys could each go down the line and just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came into your jobs working for these great companies.
Okay, I'm going to start. My name is Kai Kuehne. I'm the regional director for Airbnb in Latin America. I have been with the company for 3 years. Started in our international operations team out of Berlin, then moved to Barcelona, built our office and team for Spain and Portugal there, and then moved to Sao Paulo to work in Brazil and Latin America, and now moving from San Francisco, where I lived in between, to Miami, where we just opened another office for Latin America. Before that, I'm obviously not from Brazil. I am from Germany. I started an internet company there in 2007 and built it until 2010 and sold it. And then became a host on Airbnb in the meantime for a year where I was just traveling and really loved it. And actually, that's how I ended up with Airbnb.
Great. Luis?
Yep. Hi, I'm Luis Samra. I'm the general manager for Evernote Latin America. And I started with Evernote 3 years ago. Pretty much, I started the whole regional division. One of the main things that they wanted was somebody who spoke Portuguese and knew Brazil. It's been great experience in terms of starting up a American company where the product is already very well loved in the country. So it's been an incredible experience for us. And I'm based here in San Francisco.
Hi, I'm Megan Zoback, and I'm the head of expansion for the Americas at Uber. Been at Uber for just over 2 years, and I joined right after graduating from the business school across the street, and started out in international expansion, so actually going to cities by myself, operationalizing them, kind of spinning up Uber in new cities around the world. Now I'm based in San Francisco, managing a team of launchers who are all in South America, leading up our city expansion.
Hi, I'm Rodrigo Velloso. I work at YouTube. I've been working in the Bay Area for the past 3 years and worked for Google in Brazil in São Paulo for 4 years before that. Currently, I'm the global head of gaming for YouTube, gaming video content, to be clear. And prior to that, I headed up our Latin American content partnerships organization. Before Google, I worked for 8 years at Brazilian media conglomerate Grupo Abril. And before that, I was an international expansion strategy consultant.
Great. So before we get started, I want to learn a little bit about you guys, because I think the best way we could tailor this this conference and this talk is to know what is it that you guys are trying to get out of it. So just a quick raise of hands. Who here works for a startup? Awesome. Anybody here work for like brands or ad agencies? Great. Any like developers, freelance coders, makers? Awesome. And anything else that I missed in big categories, feel free to shout it out. Lawyers, academics, ambassadors. Ambassador. I'm pretty sure we have one of those in the audience. Awesome. So first I want to ask you guys to each go down the line and give us sort of a high-level picture of how did you decide it was the right time to move into Brazil? It can be tough to know how to stretch your resources. It's such a big nation. It can be a real challenge just to break into it from zero. But it's obviously such a big market that there's amazing opportunities once you do get in there. So when did you know it was the right time for your businesses, or how did your companies know it was the right time to make the move to Brazil? We're going to start right here.
So I think for many companies that come out of the Bay Area and are consumer focused, at some point they're going to ask themselves, do we want to be a US only company, or do we actually want to be global? And for Airbnb, that question came actually pretty early on, because the business is global. I mean, Airbnb is all about international travel. So basically from first day on, people were using it around the world. And if you look at this, I think for us there were three main reasons why we decided, or when we decided to go into Brazil. There's community. The second reason was build out a network of local stakeholders. And the third one was actually competition. So for community, Airbnb is a community-focused marketplace. So basically, we provide the platform, but the real product happens in the real world where hosts and guests meet and provides accommodation to each other. We knew that this can only work out globally if we're local and personal, if we build our community and actually educate them of how to be a good host. So we knew that this would be different in Brazil, it would be different in Japan, or be different in South Africa. So we'd actually have to go there and teach these people how to be good hosts. So the first one was community. The second reason was we know that we're changing the way how people do economic interactions. So we're part of the sharing economy. People share certain goods that they have with each other, and we know that this is really ingrained in the way how people transact, and that this actually needs to be, in order to shape that, we need to be in touch with the local stakeholders, with local partners, with local policymakers, to be able to create an environment where sharing is possible. And the third reason was actually a competitive reason. So there were in 2011, there were a lot of competitors popping out. And we saw that if we wanted to win the war against them, or the battle against them, we actually had to be in our most important markets and mostly build out supply there.
So that's really interesting. There's a bunch of good insights there. I think that understanding that if you're a company that has to build up a community slowly, like you need to teach your users how the whole process works. It's not something you can just flip on. Like, there's some sales organizations where it's just really a matter of getting people in that country pressing a button. But with Airbnb, it's such a full body experience. They really have to live up to the code of Airbnb. And so if you need that community, you have to start earlier in those markets and plan farther ahead of time. And for competition, it can be better to really nail your core product, nail your core business if you don't have to race to launch internationally too early. But if you do see other people who might steal that first mover advantage from you, it's really important to get out there a little bit more quickly. So those are two important points to understand when you're deciding when to make a launch internationally or in Brazil. Luis, would you tell us a little bit about your guys' story?
Sure. So the idea when I joined Evernote is that we were expanding globally. We already had Asia Pacific, Europe, and of course the US. And when the decision was made to, let's start expanding into Latin America, we already had a certain number of users in many countries, so all the way from Mexico down to Brazil. But the most interesting thing is that the position was, if we were really going to take serious the market, we needed to establish ourselves immediately in key markets, and Brazil was one of them. There were a lot of factors that were going to impact us. The conversion of feature phones to smartphones. Brazil was one of the fastest markets in the world that's converting today. So we needed to be there and anticipate that before the explosion had it. We also went out and looked for partners that had the ability to give us a bigger distribution early on. And so in order to do that, we had to establish ourselves in Brazil in order to have credibility that we were serious about the market. So by the time in 2011, we were around 200,000 users in Brazil. Today, we've already surpassed the 3 million mark, and we're still growing exponentially month to month there. But one of the points that you said is our product takes some time to use and it's to start using it. So these 200,000 people that we had were the real hardcore geeks that we had in Brazil. So we had to come out of that circle to find the rest of the 3 million people that we found in order to show them how to use the product, especially on the smartphone, which was a new thing in the market.
Cool. So I'm hearing about you looking at structural change and seeing that shift in platforms. Are people moving from laptops to mobile? Are people moving from mobile to smartwatches? Knowing when a specific market is making the move to the platform that you're best at is really important for knowing when to launch. And getting those partnerships can give you that local credibility and that local expansion. So it seems like a really smart strategy for you guys is to get enough traction so that people believe that you're important, and then use those partnerships to expand as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Cool. So how about you, Megan?
Yeah, so we expanded super quickly. So when I joined 2 years ago, we were in 15 cities, and the only international cities we were in were Toronto and Paris, and now we're in 207 cities, 45 countries. So the decision for us was, we want to get everywhere as fast as we possibly can, and Brazil is a place that, we wanted to make sure we did it correctly, but I knew that if we were going to wait for every single piece to be absolutely perfect, we would never go. So kind of the tipping point for me to decide to really launch our first Brazilian city was the World Cup. One thing that we really look at when we think about expansion is eyeballs. So what that means is how many people are actually opening the Uber app in a city anywhere around the world, and we capture that. And we were just seeing, lots of Brazilians downloading the app. They'd heard about it through other channels, downloading it and not seeing any cars, and that kills me to see. So I knew that was only going to increase as tons of foreigners who are used to using Uber in their home cities would be in Brazil for the World Cup. So that was really the driving force to launch. And we actually launched Rio the night before the World Cup started. So yeah, that was pretty much the main driver. So we're pretty new in Brazil.
That's good. It can be easy to let the developers tinker and want to get everything perfect, or everyone in the organization wants to put the best foot forward, and that's an admirable desire. But really, this is technology. It's about fast, iterating quickly, getting something out there, understanding what problems you have, what's different about that community that you're going to have to modify your app or your product to work with, and just get it out there, and then figure everything else out later. And I think that's really smart. It's you don't want to damage your perception, but you don't have to wait for everything to be perfect.
Yeah.
I think Megan touched on an interesting point, which is that as digital companies, we already have a good sense of how many users, how many people are interested in our products and services in a certain market before we go in there. Right? A bricks and mortar company, you have to either export to that market, you have to take some action with regard to that market before you get that information, or else you're relying on secondhand information. With YouTube, it was, I think, an interesting, slightly different situation, because YouTube had been acquired by Google in late 2006. And Google had its IPO in 2004 and was well funded at the time, was already expanding internationally into several markets, already had a large office and a large presence in Brazil. And so the process of bringing YouTube to Brazil was a very natural one. It was driven by the user base that we had there. And it was really about enabling the other two aspects of our business. So generally speaking, YouTube has three kind of stakeholders. One is the users, of course. Second one is creators, or anyone who's creating content, whether they're a user uploading a single video or a major media company managing a lot of intellectual property, and advertisers. And so our process of localization was prioritized kind of based on usership. And from there, it involved a series of activities to make it possible for the other two legs to sustain themselves. So the creator side of things, which has a lot of work around content licensing, around making it possible for users to upload materials without facing legal risks and so forth, and also about enabling advertising on the platform so that those users have an incentive to keep uploading content and generating revenue on our platform.
That's cool. So you guys took a more data-driven approach and could see really what was going on in the country before you were even there. And I think that's been a really popular strategy for a lot of international companies, is to put up some kind of landing page or sign-up sheet, track where the location of those sign-ups are coming from, and then look at, these are the countries where people are really desperate for our product, and that's where we should be focusing perhaps early so that you can take advantage of that demand as soon as possible. Great. So maybe we could start. I want to look at, how did you actually execute this launch? Like, what did you do? What can people learn from your execution? Not just like a high level theory, but like on the ground, how did you do it?
So I think, having talked a little bit about community before, we asked ourselves before launching Brazil, what does it take for us to be successful there? And this specifically means in Brazil, how can we drive adoption? For a business like Airbnb, it actually means that you want to change behavior of people, because not a lot of people nowadays are used to opening their homes to people they've just met through the internet. It's a pretty new behavior for our generation.
But Brazilians are pretty friendly, right? They must have been receptive.
Brazilians are pretty friendly and they're very receptive, and I think they really embrace hosting people from other cultures, and I think they're actually some of the best hosts we have on the platform. But still, before we went into the market, a lot of people said, is this going to work in Brazil? Are they really going to open their homes to strangers? So we thought about how can we achieve this, and we have this idea at Airbnb. It's more important to have 100 people who love you than have 1 million people who kind of like you. So our goal was to go into Brazil and actually create this initial small group of people who completely fall in love with Airbnb. So what we did is we went to Brazil, we did the basics. So we created a subsidiary, we hired leadership, we created a small team, and then basically kicked it off with a lot of community events. We actually had one big community launch event in Rio where we brought a few hundreds of our best community members on a boat, had a big party with them, and just celebrated what it meant to be part of the community on Airbnb. So that was the kickoff. But then after that, there were months and months and months where it's just a lot of education, where you need to get together with them and where you need to tell them or kind of educate what it means to be a great host, but also ignite this passion for what Airbnb stands for. So I think that was one of the main things we said. We go into the market and we kind of built this initial group of people who are really passionate about what Airbnb is. Yeah,
I love that quote, that it's more important to have 100 people that love you than 1 million who kind of like you.
That's actually a Paul Graham quote, so I don't know.
Everything smart that's ever been said, Paul Graham probably said it first. He's the president and the founder of Y Combinator, or the old president. And if you want to tweet and share any of this information with your friends, feel free to just tag at BayBrazil in your tweets, and then we'll be able to all follow along if you search for those. So, Luis, why don't you tell us a little bit about your strategy for getting feet on the ground and making it happen?
So the first thing and the most important thing is make sure you have your legal team behind you. It's like, without legal, you won't get too far. And then right after that, do the finance. But the legal team actually was crucial because they helped us establish a legal entity in Brazil, which gave us the opportunity to then do some serious partnerships, local partnerships, and the credibility to do those partnerships, because now we were a Brazilian company, not just an American company with a guy flying in there once in a while that they met. We had a presence, local presence, and right after that, we hired as well a PR agency, but the PR agency purpose for us is not to do press releases of that, but it works more like a extension of a marketing group for us. And what they do is that we strategize what do we want to talk about, what do we want to say, what's the company, what's our position, and then find media, find bloggers, find influencers to talk to, meet with them, a lot of grassroots stuff, a lot of meetups that we had to do at the beginning in order to create more buzz, because the brand was not known at the time. So we had to build all this up from zero. And the PR agency was crucial to get our voice out with articles in many magazines, bloggers talking about us and stuff like that, so that built traction and then it started spreading.
So both of you, you mentioned doing efforts online, but an even bigger focus seems to have been live events, like things in person.
Yeah.
How do you actually get those events started and get people in the door if nobody really knows who you are?
So you find in our case, we found local influencers, bloggers who did the invites with us.
Do you pay them?
No, they are actually Evernote users, so they were more than happy to support us. So we found...
So you gave them free credits.
We gave them free credits, yes, for sure. But they more than anything, it's amazing when people love your product, they really want to help you out because they want to spread the voice about how good the product is. And we have a lot of fans, and Evernote fans are amazing. So once we got there, we started doing these meetups, and we did 2 or 3 a day, where we had probably 20 people show up and then 50 people, but we were just consistent with that. And talking to reporters as well was also part of getting in a lot of media and press that gave the name out, and then people started getting curious. And the partnerships that we were with were distribution partners. For example, Samsung in Brazil preloads Evernote on all their devices. So now people were looking at an app on the phone, and they sort of, okay, I've heard of Evernote, what is it? So it helped us out as well.
Yeah, those preload partnerships are huge if you have a company that's big enough to be able to strike them.
Yeah. Maybe one comment to that. It's actually very interesting to see how passionate people are to meet with someone of a company that they really like or a product that they really like. So what we saw when we went into Brazil is that they were just, they're really coming. There was no problem at all to get in touch with our initial community. And we had a time where we actually where we called everyone who signed up as a host in Airbnb and just gave them like a welcome and helped them explain a little bit how to use the platform and so on.
And that's cute.
And people loved it. People loved it because it was really unusual for them that someone of a digital company that they're using reached out to them and got in personal contact with them. So I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and for press, I've heard a great strategy is like find somebody who does really love you, who's like a blogger or a writer somewhere, and then ask them like who are their contemporaries, who are the other writers that they respect and that like people think of as the real voice of the nation, and ask them to help you get in touch with those people, because it can be tough coming from outside to know who are the leaders of that culture, and so getting someone on the inside, like an inside man, to help you with that can be a big boon. So Megan, how about you guys?
Yeah, so I would definitely echo what Luis said about getting lawyers on board first. It was definitely an important thing for us as well. So I think that kind of dual-tracked, when I think about our launch, there's kind of like the back-end corporate stuff, and then there's the on-the-ground ops. So on the corporate side, incorporating an entity took a very long time, so we had to start that process, well in advance. And then, structuring our payments. In a lot of countries, we can kind of go in with a cookie-cutter payment solution, but in Brazil, we really needed to bring payments onshore and do a really specialized solution that would be most appropriate. We really didn't want to launch until we had that in place. And then, obviously, taxes in Brazil are, as everyone knows, very complicated, very complex, so it took a lot longer than a normal country. And so while, I'm kind of leading that, another country. Sorry. So while that's going on, the launch team is actually on the ground operationalizing. So I had a launcher on the ground meeting with drivers, going to hotels where professional drivers hang out, knocking on their window, explaining Uber to them, getting them excited. Really, really grassroots in terms of building up the supply base, and then at the same time, starting to look for marketing opportunities. So the really nice thing about our product is that it lends itself very nicely to event partnerships, because if you're organizing an event, you need people to get to and from that event, and if we can give you a code to allow people to come free, then you're probably going to be excited and email out to all of your guests, kind of promoting Uber without us having to do it ourselves, which is always better. And really focusing on getting those initial rides just the absolute best, like top customer experience, really nice vehicles, very clean. So when people get to the event, everyone's talking about their great ride and really sharing that with one another. And that's kind of, when we did decide to launch, we threw a big party where, everyone came and left in Uber, and it was amazing because everyone at the party was talking about their rides and comparing and contrasting, and we really do that on an ongoing basis. And it helps grow a lot.
I love that vision of somebody like knocking on cab windows and be like, "Hey, you want to see my app?" But really, you can't just like hand someone a flyer or even tell them about it. I've heard that really the best way, take the phone out of their hand and download the app for them and just put it on their screen, because like that was how Twitter really got started. Actually, it was at this party and people and one of the founders went around and literally was like, "I'll sign you up. I'll sign you up. Give me your phone. I will go to the website. I will set it up for you." Because if you just tell them about it, you give them some like business card or some flyer, they're gonna forget. They're gonna throw it away. It's not gonna mean anything to them. Like once something's on their phone, you have such a better chance of retention and them actually using it. So I think that's been a great strategy, and it's cool to see that you guys have looked in that direction.
Absolutely.
Great, Rodrigo.
Yeah, so for us, it was as I said before, less a question of finding users. It was Brazil was already a large market for YouTube in terms of usership, and it was much more a question of scaling and of legalization and of localization than actually market development. And as Megan said, Brazil's not a normal country.
It's special.
No worries. I think we're at once ashamed and proud of that. So and so one of the things that was very curious early on, we had to actually get the domain name. The youtube.com.br domain name had been registered by somebody else. I'm not sure how you say malandro in in English. Sneaky maybe is the. And then we had to pursue a lot of other initiatives that were about, again, making it legal for people to receive payments. I think Megan pointed out payments. That's a particularly challenging aspect of entering Brazil. The payment system is. Payment systems are very complex because of the tax situation, because of other situations. But it's also a very advanced banking system and has various ways around the limitations that exist as well. So, but figuring those out takes time. We also had a lot of legal challenges from the perspective of YouTube being a content hosting platform. The safe harbor laws of Brazil, all of the legal aspects of hosting third-party content, and the requirements around that, around music licensing, around deals with collection societies. So really, without getting too much mired by the detail of it all, there was a lot of work by a lot of different teams: finance, legal, content, marketing, and advertising sales, to make the business of YouTube possible in Brazil. So to replicate that which makes it successful in other parts of the world and adapt that to Brazil.
So when you launch internationally, get your legal team involved early, because it's fine to move fast and break things, but you just don't break the law while you're doing it. So what about the challenges? I want to hear what was the toughest thing about launching in Brazil, and how did you overcome that challenge? Maybe we can start on the far end with you, Rodrigo.
Yeah, again, I would say it was the negotiations that we had to undertake in order to let's say normalize our relations with other companies and institutions in Brazil, whether government institutions or private institutions that are supported by different laws, like the music collection societies.
So did you hire local lawyers that understood that stuff, or were you bringing in lawyers from outside?
Both. So at Google we have our own legal team, and they were certainly working on all of those things. But we also hired outside counsel and specialists in different areas of the law.
Cool. Yeah, that seems smart. It's like going into a legal market or some, anything to deal with regulation. If you don't quite understand it, there's a huge opportunity to shoot yourself in the foot, or the face, depending on how bad you do it. Megan, what about you guys? What was tough about Brazil? And I'm sure it was kind of crazy launching during the World Cup.
Yeah, so I mean, from the World Cup perspective, it was just crazy because there was so much more demand than we could possibly fulfill, and we wanted so badly for everyone to have this perfect, amazing experience.
That's where surge pricing comes in, right?
Not in a brand new city though. Gotta grow a little bit. So I would definitely echo the legal issues. Although for us, that's not unique to Brazil. We do see regulatory issues all over the world. So that probably saw faster reaction from the incumbent industry, so the taxi industry in Brazil, than we've ever seen. But seeing a reaction from them is not novel. So yeah, I would mostly say everything on the legal side for us was also the most challenging.
What about you? Was there anything different about how Brazilians work in terms of like the way that they drive, or how the streets work, or something like that was different?
So I mean, the traffic, as everyone knows.
Here's some chuckling in the crowd. You got some crazy drivers out there?
It's actually, I think, something that helped us because the traffic is pretty bad and people generally are not super pleased, especially in Rio, with the quality of the taxis. So giving people a comfortable way to get around and safely and not worry about crazy driving was a selling point rather than a challenge.
That's like my favorite part of Uber, is just not being in the driver's seat. I live in San Francisco, and I swear people are just hurling themselves in front of my car. And I forget when I ride Uber for like a week or so, and then I drive my own car, and it's like, oh my God, everyone is insane. And it's like my blood pressure is rising. It's like, I think I'm probably cutting back on my healthcare costs just by taking Uber instead. So what about you, Luis? How did you guys handle Evernote in Brazil? So
one of the things is the size of the cities there. I mean, Sao Paulo is huge. It's like a CEO went there for the first time, and when he went there, first thing he said is that he'll never look at New York the same way anymore. It was just, it's really staggering. So the thing is that being by yourself there, you have to be very strategic where you do the events and how do you get people. So that took a lot of time to get organized in order to start getting traction and attention from users to discover us, and to start new users in particular to start figuring out who we were and what we were trying to do. But it's just also geographically we're based here and we didn't have a person in Brazil, so it was kind of a challenge to have continuity that we were able to continue to build motion and build traction as we started there.
If you could go back and do it again, would you have hired someone on the ground earlier?
For sure, but we didn't have a legal structure to do that at the time because we were still working. That took some time to figure out. But definitely we would have had somebody locally there. And when we reached a certain number, that's when we started. And that's the story of Evernote around the world. We reach a certain number of users. We go into the market, we start doing things, and then when we reach a certain number, we hire local marketing people and people to help us out locally.
But it might be smart to do that a little earlier than you would even expect, because the coordination cost of just trying to handle everything from overseas seems like crazy, especially with time zones and languages and all of this.
It is, but when you're a startup with small resources and 90% of them are all engineering, then you have to figure out how to move forward with what you have.
Do not send a random engineer to Brazil. That's not going to work. Okay, how about you guys? What was tough about Brazil in particular?
So yeah, when we look at the challenges of launching in Brazil, I think there were the front-end challenges, so consumer-facing challenges, and then there are the back-end challenges, which go around tax and legal, so I think we've heard a little bit about that. So on the front end, it actually means you implement a new business model or a disruptive company in a new country. So this means you have to change behavior. And for us, this actually meant to build trust around Airbnb. And we did this in two ways. One was describe the personal interaction with the community and a lot of communication, also a lot through comms, giving a lot of interviews and actually just explaining what it is we are doing. And the second piece to this was actually building out features on the website around trust. So launching a host guarantee on the website that covers up to 1.8 million reais in damages, possible damages to your place, or launching ID verification on the website. So those were two of the main things we did to build trust for the model. And then in the back end, we had mostly tax and legal issues. I think payment is a big topic in Brazil, and it's actually Brazil. To anyone I talk to within the internet industry, everyone knows that Brazil is probably one of the most complicated countries to launch payments in. So we're still struggling with this, and that's something that is probably the biggest challenge for us on the back end.
In terms of like making that trust happen and like wording yourself, like did you have local translators or people who could not just take the English words and put them into Portuguese, but to make it like actually feel authentic and align with the values of the nation?
Yeah, that is actually one big part of the localization, is bringing people on board who understand how to communicate whatever we stand for in words that, someone in Brazil would understand. And yeah, that happens through local translators, but also running everything through the local team and making sure that that the message actually gets through.
Yeah, I think it can be tough to remember that you have to go beyond utility. You can't just be useful. You have to be safe. You have to be something that people can rely on and they don't have to worry about. Because if that's something that is even in their mind when it comes to using your startup, there's always going to be some apprehension. They're always going to use it a little bit less, and you have fewer use cases and be less likely to tell everyone about it. So like really strengthening that trust is super critical. All right, so
and if I may just add,
yes, please.
make sure, and majority of people here don't have to worry about this, that you use Brazilian Portuguese and not Portuguese from Portugal. When I got there, I looked at our website in Portuguese and it was, oh my God, we must be getting a lot of hate mail or something like that from Brazil. So we had to localize everything, including the app itself, into the local Brazilian Portuguese to make it more relevant locally.
Now, I don't want to delve into stereotypes, but I would really like to hear, what do you think is different about the Brazilian market? What about the national identity, the characteristics of the people, the infrastructure? What is it that makes it different, and that are big things that you have to watch out for when you're launching there compared to any other country?
One thing I'd call out is that it's a very large endemic market, right? What I mean by that is that, at least in a content business, we have a lot of things that are produced in Brazil for Brazilians, and often as a external company coming in, you're competing with that of something that's very, very local, very specialized for that group. At YouTube, it means that a lot of the content that's produced by creators in Brazil is consumed by users in Brazil, whereas on average, globally, are about 60% of anything that's consumed on YouTube is consumed outside of its market of origin. In Brazil, it's quite the opposite. The majority is consumed internally. So it's a huge, by a huge endemic market, I mean that companies can be sustained focusing just on that market, and that focus yields competitive advantage for those companies.
So how do you work around? How do you beat a company that is born and bred in Brazil if you're coming from the outside?
Yeah, I think you do things differently. You bring a different way of providing the service that you provide, and do it disruptively.
For you guys at YouTube, did you really stoke the creator community in Brazil? Did you go out and find those people who could potentially become Brazilian YouTube stars and really help rear them and give them extra resources and advice?
We're doing more and more of that. So things like developing spaces where creators can come in and use equipment and use studio equipment, cameras, and things like that to produce content. We've done it in the past by helping to fund certain initiatives. I think we definitely encourage those things, but we also rely on the scale economics of everything. So creators start to create. Brazil is a very creative country. Lots of creative talent there, whether in advertising and in content production in general, I'd say, as well as in design and products. So it wasn't terribly difficult to harness that, and it was more about calling out those talents and emphasizing them once you do. So reinforcing what is already being, the feedback that you're already getting from your users and your platform.
What about you, Megan?
Yeah, so the biggest difference is actually a great thing about Brazil is that there's such a rich talent pool in Brazil as compared to the rest of Latin America, at least as far as we've experienced. So every city we operate in, we hire 3 locals to run the market, right? We don't pretend like we understand what's best for any given city. From San Francisco, we want someone locally to really take ownership and be the CEO of that market.
San Francisco is pretty weird. It's
Yeah.
not a good place to start from if you're trying to generalize.
Exactly. And, we wouldn't pretend to know what's best for Kuala Lumpur or South Africa or, Rio. So we need to find local people. And what we found is, Santiago, Lima, Panama City, these have been really, really challenging cities to hire in for the type of people we're looking for. And we found incredible talent in Brazil, both Brazilians living in their home city, and we actually hired our GM of Sao Paulo is the Stanford guy who just graduated in the spring, who's originally from Sao Paulo and went back down to run that market for us. So from my perspective, that is the biggest difference, and it's an amazing one and one I'm really excited about.
That's cool, because a lot of countries, it can be tough if you're having trouble from the outside, but you're not sure that the talent is good enough locally. It's hard to tell what to do, but it's like if the talent in Brazil is so great, then it makes the decision easier just to say, let's hire someone on the ground because we're not going to get this and they're going to do a great job with it.
Exactly. Kind of customize our playbook of what works best globally and really tailor it to customize it for the city.
Fair. What about you, Luis?
It's really the amazing adoption of gadgets and new stuff there. It's really explosive. Once they start looking at this thing and they're willing to experiment with new devices and stuff like that. And that's why it was very important for us to be early on before the smartphone explosion really happened and be early on the curve of that. Because if you see now, the conversions are just massive of people just going over to these smart devices because maybe those are their first experience on the internet or some device that has actual connection to Wi-Fi. So this great adoption of technology is amazing. I don't think we see that in many other countries.
Yeah, it's an awesome insight that Brazil is full of curious early adopters. So if you can get your name in there first in a product category, there's a lot of willingness to experiment, and they're not going to sit back on their heels and wait. Like in some countries where they really want everything to be obvious that this is the winner or this is going to be the next big thing before they even make any move to experiment.
Yeah.
So for me, I think there are 2 differences that stand out. Number one is that internet penetration in Brazil is still comparatively low. So with about 50% of Brazilians being online, but they make up for that with social media utilization. So one thing I think that's really important whenever you go to Brazil is you need to ask yourself how you can create a social media strategy that works or that taps into this potential. And we're still a little bit behind with that. So for example, if you look at a competitor, well, not necessarily a competitor, but another really big travel company in Brazil, Hotel Urbano, who has 10 million fans on Facebook, and Airbnb has about 500,000 on a global scale. So it really shows how big you can become if you really tap into social media in Brazil and build it into your strategy.
Were there any specific strategies? Like what kind of content do Brazilians like?
So yeah, I think Brazilians really like inspirational content when it comes, definitely when it comes to travel. So we try to promote a lot of the outstanding original destinations that we have around the world. But we also try to more and more promote the domestic destinations in Brazil, because actually 95% of all tourism in Brazil is domestic tourism. So we really try to showcase the amazing destinations that are in Brazil and help people to discover them.
That's great, because in America, like the inspirational content can come off a little bit cliched and like hokey. People are kind of cynical and snarky here, but it sounds like in Brazil, people are a little bit more optimistic, a little bit more open-hearted, and willing to take those things that are like, wow, that's beautiful, and doesn't always have to be like that's funny or that's smart. It's like it can just feel good, and I like that because I think that makes for great content. You can tell really good stories around that perspective. So what has the progress been like for you guys? Do any of you guys have any stats to share you can tell us about like how big your companies have grown in Brazil?
Actually, taking the cue from Luis and Kay, who both commented on adoption of technology by Brazilians, it's really incredible to us still at YouTube after many years in the market that Brazil is a top 5 market for us for by any measure that we use. If we use the measure of revenue, if we use the measure of watch time, which is one of our primary measures internally, if we use the measure of uploads of videos by creators. Virtually any measure that we use, Brazil shows up as a top 5 market. For us as an internet company that is fully global, we're in 72 localized 72 countries around the world. So it's really surprising that Brazil is that consistent in its performance in adoption by users, by creators, by advertisers, because it's not among the top 5 economies in the world. It's not among the top 5 by internet penetration in the world. It shouldn't be that big of a digital market, but it is.
So Brazil's bigger than it looks.
Yeah.
It's already pretty big. Great. What about you guys? Anything to reveal? Any juicy stats?
I mean, I can say we're growing incredibly fast week over week, which is kind of what we look at in terms of measuring the success of a market. It's definitely the highest in the region. And we just launched today, or are about to launch today, Belo Horizonte. So we will have a 3rd Brazilian city starting today, which we're really excited about. And if it's anything like Rio and Sao Paulo, we expect it to kind of have this off-the-charts growth as well.
And your guys' CEO just at our conference the other day, the TechCrunch Disrupt San Francisco conference, Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, said that you guys are now hiring 50,000 people a month.
Well, creating 50,000 jobs.
Creating 50,000 jobs a month, which is like a stunning growth rate. I mean, that's somebody who's like, oh, cool. So like in about 200 years, they'll have employed everyone on the planet.
Yeah, let's see if it's sustainable forever. But yeah, it's amazing. That's obviously a global figure, not Brazil figure. But yeah, it's creating a ton of jobs in every city we operate in.
Yeah, for us, we just about a week ago, we just crossed over the 3 million users in Brazil, and we're probably averaging now close to 200,000 new users a month in growth. So it's been pretty steady.
So for us, when we launched in 2012, we had about 2,000 listings in Brazil. Now we have 40,000 listings. A lot of that growth actually happened within the last 6 to 9 months, driven by the World Cup. During the World Cup, we actually cooperated with some of the local governments. So, for example, we cooperated with a government in Cuiabá that had very limited accommodation capacities for the World Cup, and where we sent a team and they built the market from 100 listings to 1,000 listings within 2 weeks, and actually helped to accommodate the visitors for the World Cup. In general, the World Cup was pretty successful for us, so we had about 120,000 people of the international guests staying on Airbnb during the World Cup out of the 600,000, so that's 20% of all World Cup visitors were staying on Airbnb. And just to relate to what Rodrigo said, in terms of size of Brazil, Rio right now has about 20,000 listings, so that's half of Brazil, and is the number 3 city within Airbnb.
Wow, that's crazy that 20% of the international visitors to the World Cup stayed through Airbnb. That's really awesome. Cool. So now I want to hear. You guys have spent time on the ground. You've seen what the market has and what the market needs. I want you to help out our audience with some ideas. Tell us, what do you think are the big opportunities for maybe for consumer startups that could launch in Brazil, things that Brazil really needs, or even business to business startups that could help other startups to succeed in Brazil.
I think we just riffing off of the panel, just payments, right? I think we all said it. Payments is a very complex part of doing business in Brazil, and a barrier to entry and to development. Even if you're able to create a solution for the problem as a company, it can still be improved. And I don't think, even having been in the market for, I think we went into 2005, so we're almost 10 years in that market. We still haven't solved all of our payment issues. And that's with considerable corporate resources behind all of our products and services.
Yeah, so please, somebody out there fix payments in Brazil for the rest of us.
Yeah, I definitely echo payments. I don't really have anything else.
So we didn't have issues with payments. So we early on, and we had an understanding of the local payment processes and all that. So we implemented those, and they were really quick and efficient. So if anybody needs tips here.
So wait, so what did you do? If everyone else is having so much trouble, what did you do differently?
Yeah, it's
What's your secret, Luis?
It's knowing the financial system there and how the credit cards work and who are the processors and who are the acquirers and all that stuff. And once you know all that stuff, it really helps to understand that. But there's a lot of companies that claim to do business of transactions in Brazil, and they present their transactions in local currency, and then at the end the user gets a transaction somewhere in Ireland or in the Caribbean. And it's not a local transaction. It's really happening, and you can't even use a Brazilian local credit card because it won't be processed. It can only be an international card. So this is another thing, that there's a Visa card for international usage, meaning inside of Brazil and outside of Brazil, and then there's just the ones for local inside of Brazil. And the majority of the cards are local issued cards. So when these processors claim they have the ability to process, then they get the credit card, and there's a lot of rejections because most of the cards are not international. So there's that issue there.
Additional service fee on the international card.
On top of that, yes. But people do it. Well,
I would definitely also say payments. I think there is a big difference what kind of business you are, if you're selling an end product to a consumer, or if you're a platform business like Uber or Airbnb. And yeah, a lot of complexity comes in when you're a platform business, but also when you have a lot of international transactions. And I think the international credit card penetration is very low in Brazil, so you have to go into national credit cards. But if you go into national credit cards, you have to run payments through a local entity, and that is sometimes not the best solution. So hoping that I think we're in the law faculty, so there are a lot of lawyers out here, hopefully actual or future policy makers. I think that's the main challenge to solve in Brazil for any company that wants to set up shop and run business in the country.
Great. So now I want to open it up to the audience for some questions. Everything from their experiences to their suggestions for strategies for you guys. What do you need to know that we haven't covered yet? And we've got a microphone coming around, so I'll just point them out, and we'll start up there, in the black and green.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Great job moderating the panel, by the way.
Thank you.
My name is Yin. I'm based here in the Bay Area, and I work for Compass Advisory. We help fast-growing and very resource-strapped companies go global. And one of the themes across this panel, obviously you're very successful companies expanding globally, in Brazil in particular, is go, 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 go. Let's go everywhere as fast as we can. And oftentimes for my clients, I have to dial back their enthusiasm a bit and say, hey, let's take a breather, take a step back. Let's not go as fast as you want to go, because you are very likely to overstretch yourself. And so I want to know from your perspective, having experienced such fast growth, where have you stopped and said, let's actually say no to this country because we are not ready?
I would say nowhere for Uber.
Uber's destined to rule the world.
same for us. Yeah.
Okay.
we haven't stopped. I mean, there was no way to dial back. If Brazil is a big country, and it's a very important country. It is one of the biggest growing countries for Evernote worldwide. So it's a matter that it's a serious part for us in terms of our growth. So we haven't stopped.
I would say we had an 80-20 approach. So we opened about 20 offices in the last 2 years around the world, and then we could have opened 50 offices. But those 20 offices drive 80 or more than 80% of our business. So that was the ones that we picked. That were the ones we picked.
Yeah, I think from not to stick to the point of endemic markets, one of the problems is that you can't always take your own speed. Because a problem that we had with Asia, not so much with Latin America, was that we would launch our products in the United States, then we would gradually go to Europe. And by the time we got to Asia, somebody else had already made a better, or not a better, but a localized version of that product, and was ahead of us in that market. all of a sudden, even though the innovation had been ours. So that's one of the reasons why it's go, 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 and you can't really stop. Having said that, I think there's also cases where, we have, because of legal challenges, because of complexities of local markets, where we have held back and then accelerated for other reasons. I think a great example on the YouTube side is in the Middle East, where we had been holding off on developing local presence due to size of market and complexities of doing business in those markets. But the Arab Spring and the huge kind of upswing in usage of YouTube during the Arab Spring led us to kind of accelerate that rollout plan.
Okay, is there another question? Right here.
Thank you for speaking to us today. My name is Karen Bhatti. I'm an attorney, and I'm launching a public policy startup in New York. I have a question, especially for the people who are working on the sharing economy platforms, Airbnb and Uber. Kay, you touched upon this about building trust. I was wondering internally, what are you doing, what are both platforms doing to make sure that you're ensuring safety? It's not something specific to Brazil, but are there any specific measures that you're taking and anything particular to Brazil to build trust internally as well as externally?
Airbnb as a platform has about 40 security features that we've built out in the last years to guarantee security once you transact through the platform. So things like verified ID, host guarantee, review system on the platform, social media integration, that we have the transaction actually run through our platform. So we have people have to use their credit card with us. And I think that's the main thing you can do. I mean, you need to understand what possibilities there are for fraud and anticipate them and then counteract them and build out these features. And I think this is the first thing, so you need to do your homework. And the second step is to actually communicate about this. And I think we have developed this specific host guarantee for Brazil. We have it in other countries as well, but that was a big part also of communicating what we do for security. And this helps a lot to build trust.
Yeah, for us, I'd say security or safety is one of our top priorities right now for the company globally. In Brazil, we do both state and federal background checks of all the drivers, do in-person interviews of everyone, really make sure that, they're totally good to go from that perspective. And then, as a company more globally, we do, this in every single market we're in, and then we have an overarching insurance policy that will fill in gaps when local insurance, like every driver both has their personal insurance and there's an umbrella policy covering. So, there's, a lot that we've been doing and a lot of emphasis on, making sure that not only is Uber convenient and, easy, but the safest ride you can possibly get.
I'm Katie Dickinson from Everwise, and we're working with the government of Brazil on the Inovativa mentoring program. I was talking with a potential mentor who was an intellectual property lawyer, and she said that in Brazil, software is copyrighted but not patented. And I'm wondering how the difference in the way the law handles and treats and supports software, has that made any difference in the way you do business, since we've been talking about law?
So not really, not for us. We actually have an open API that people can take it for free and copy Evernote. Actually, the API is what Evernote would use Evernote today. The API is, so anybody can create an Ever Brazil if they want to do it and do exactly the same thing that Evernote does. But we haven't changed anything or modified anything for the Brazilian market from our software perspective, other than probably the script, the UL, something called, I don't know. I'm talking about the legalese that comes when you sign up for and you agree, accept. Yeah, terms and conditions, yeah. They had to be localized with some stuff, yeah.
Got one over here. You come back.
Hi, my name is Johnny Girardi. I'm a serial entrepreneur from Brazil, but I live here for probably longer than Margarizzi. Rodrigo made a comment about the content in Brazil being 60% local. I was remembered that about 10 years ago, MTV also made a research, and they showed that the only country in the world where more local content was presented than American content was Brazil. So not surprising that YouTube also has the same kind of ratio. Now, on the other hand, what is interesting in Brazil is, in Brazil, we, Brazilians, when we see something successful coming from abroad, we adopt very quickly, very quickly. I mean, word of mouth is probably one of the best marketing materials that the startups are taking advantage of. Even when you look at Orkut in Brazil just started grassroots and expanded exponentially. So I'm kind of curious to hear from you guys, sharing some light as far as, you also mentioned that, when you went to Brazil, people are so receptive to it. If you think, if you have like a Brazilian company doing the same thing versus you guys, did you have any competition and you found that the Brazilian competitor had an advantage because they were first, but because you guys were coming from abroad, being international, more successful, did that help you? Like Facebook, they took over Orkut is pretty much dead in Brazil, and Orkut was so much larger in Brazil. Do you guys have any competition in that regard and how it played out?
I can say something. I mean, there was a lot of competition for us in 2011. I think maybe in a way Airbnb is comparable to Facebook in a degree that networks effects matter. So we managed to outperform the competition pretty fast, and a lot of these guys have disappeared.
Yeah, for us, I wouldn't say there's any kind of direct competition doing, high-end black car service, but there are a lot of taxi apps that are operating in Brazil, and if anything, I actually think they've really helped because it's gotten people in the habit of taking out their phone and using an app to get a car, which is actually a consumer behavior shift that we've really had to kind of be the pioneers of in a lot of other markets, but because, Brazil's had these apps for a couple of years, it's actually something people are quite comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of not direct competition in the sense of other online video platforms, but certainly a lot of competition in terms of where people spend their time watching video content. So you have huge television companies in Brazil, Globo, of course, but SBT, Record, and that have an incredible amount of audience. Brazilians watch an incredible amount of television, and so naturally, there is tension there in terms of where people spend their time and competing for that time and attention.
Great. Cool. So I urge you guys to check out all these companies, download these apps if you haven't, follow these wonderful panelists on Twitter. You can check me out at Josh Constein or on TechCrunch. But just to run through, I think I was really amazed by how much insight you guys had into this and how many strategies you really just gave away for free today. And so to quickly run down through some of them, when you're planning to launch, look at the structural changes going on in the platforms. Is it time for a desktop app? Is it time for a mobile app? Is it time for a smartwatch app? Look for partnerships that can help you get expansion and growth early. If you need to sort of spin up a community or really teach your users how to use your product, you have to start a little bit earlier than if you have just like a quick one-button touch kind of app. When you do, if you have competition, you also need to think about trying to get to those new markets sooner. Whereas if you don't have local competition, thinking about trying to perfect your product as best you can before launching. Though you don't have to make everything be perfect. You can have some rough edges, get the product out there, figure out what people really want out of you and how things are different for that nation, and then you can refine your product from there instead of building to perfection and having to backtrack from there. When you're trying to figure out when to launch, put up a sign-up sheet, take up sign-ups and track the locations of them so you know where there's demand for your product. And when you're courting press, look for a local influencer who can tap you into all of the best press and the other influencers who are out there. Hold meetups, get people on the ground, bring your community together so they feel like they're interconnected and that it's like that there's camaraderie between the users, because people love to think that they're not the only one that's using some app when they're at home alone. And instead of of just giving away flyers or advertising, put the app in people's hands, make them use it for the first time, because that's really what's going to drive retention. Hire early if you can, because Brazil is a really different market and there's great talent available there. Aim to get as much trust as you can, because people don't just want utility from your product. They want to know that it's something that they can rely on. It's a country of early adopters. They're curious people. They want to try new things. Get out there early before other people break into that market. You can use social media. It's an optimistic group of people. Bring your inspirational content. And most importantly, as we said, it's not about having 1 million people, or in Brazil's case, hundreds of millions of people that use your product. It's about having a few that truly love it, because they're the ones that are going to spread you to their friends. That's how you're going to get organic growth, and that's how you can really feel like you're not an invader. You're coming from within the country, and you're something that's aligned with the Brazilian identity. So thank you guys so much for coming today and talking with us.
What a fantastic job! Obrigada! Can I say my favorite word with you guys? Obrigada! Fantastic! Josh, Kai, Luiz, Megan, Rodrigo, muito obrigada. Muito obrigada.